That little booktube. Got the mail today. Came through the humidity and the rain. The mail came with a stack of magazines. Some of them were non-literary. there were home and architecture magazines, Coastal Living, also Architectural Digest, which is just mouth-wateringly beautiful every single time. I don't know what possessed me not to subscribe to Architectural Digest my whole life. I love it so much. It's like walking through the dreams of other people. It's amazing. But it's not literary. I wish it were. If Architectural Digest, if they were enterprising, what I wouldn't give to write a monthly column for them on architecture-related books. Oh my God. There's 5 or 6, at least, every month that are worth attention. They're worth pointing out, especially to architecture fans. I don't know. It'd be amazing to break into Condé Nast. I think it would be a lot of fun. But I have no idea how he would even sculpt such a proposal to Architectural Digest. And if I did, I have a feeling that if they liked it, they would scoop the proposal and leave me behind and just give it to somebody with name recognition. One way or another. In addition to the House and Home magazines that I subscribed to en masse in the wake of the 2016 U.S. presidential election, there were also some Meteor magazines. The New Atlantic came with some. The middle of the Atlantic now is devoted to book reviews, long-form book reviews. I can't wait to get to it. I'm sure that they're always interesting, even when they aren't books that I care about or have read. And I also got the latest Esquire with roasting tobacco addict Tom Hardy on the cover. And I was looking through it. Of course, the first thing I do is look through for literary content, as silly as that sounds in a magazine like Esquire. I still go through it for literary content, and there always is some. There's always quite a bit. In fact, in this issue, there's a long article about Tom Wolfe. But the thing that I noticed is under the actual book's header by the writer Ron Rosenbaum, he's really, really good. He's incredibly talented. He wrote a book called Explaining Hitler that is in the huge, huge raft of books on Hitler. It's actually necessary reading. And he also wrote an article a little while ago called Thinking the Unthinkable about the destruction of the State of Israel. I don't know anybody who's read that article who isn't polarized by it one way or another. It is not an article where you can read it and say, well, yeah, he makes some good points and some bad points. No, instead you're either for it or against it. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of work. He's one of those kinds of lifelong freelance journalists who just sees into the heart of things before he sets pen to paper. And I was very happy to see a little piece by him. I would gladly have had it swap length with the Tom Wolfe piece. I'd read him for 10 pages. And his subject this time around is Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper, a book that some of you, if you work in bookstores and stock bookstore shelves, might be familiar with it. Some of you might also be familiar with it if you're unlucky enough to know somebody who likes it. It's just a prototypical vile conspiracy theory screed that Rosenbaum takes a brief look at it in what, it can't be more than 1,000 words, this piece. Takes a brief look at it and says, that's the literary hook that he goes by. It says at one point, sadly, according to Jacobson, who's the author of a book about Cooper, the following of the book has included a number of well-known rappers such as the late Tupac Shakur and members of the Wu-Tang Clan. And I have to assume, it's my assumption now with everyone, in the 21st century it's my assumption now with everyone, I have to assume that they have never read the book. That they're championing it for whatever reason, because of something they've heard about it. Because in addition to being full of conspiracy theories, Behold a Pale Horse is also virulently racist. And I don't think you could be a black rapper, read it, and not feel personally attacked. I don't know that would be possible. But one way or another, when I was reading the piece, I'm nothing in the world could induce me to read Behold a Pale Horse a second time. And no amount of biographical writing about the author will ever convince me that he's anything but an insect. But at the end of the piece, Rosenbaum elaborates a little on conspiracy theories just in general. And I want to read you the bit. It's so good that I wish the article had gone on. He says that he's developed a theory of conspiracy theory, and it involves two paradoxes. First, there is the arrogance/ignorance dialectic. The more ignorant conspiracy theory proponents are of history, And one thing you can be sure of is that they have a deeply impoverished knowledge of history, of the wild, unpredictable, chance-driven course of events, the frequent irretrievability of certainty from the mists of the past one gets from reading, say, 5 versions of the Battle of Hastings. The more they are likely to vaunt their mastery of the secret springs, the alleged puppet masters behind it all that make simplified plot from simple minds. The other paradox might be called insecurity/narcissism. Many of these theorists are deeply frightened by the world, by their utter lack of comprehension of historical forces. And in response to that, they put on an air of superiority as a kind of shield from allowing others to see the panic inside. If their idiocies didn't disrupt the policies of the nation or the notion that there is any such thing as reality, or that it's worth searching for rather than just making up, we might be tempted to feel sorry for them. And that's really good. The paradox is at the heart of conspiracy theories. And I think that he really hits. This is only a tangentially literary video, but I felt behooved. I'm probably gonna write about the stuff I got in the mail today, but I wanted to talk about this because I think he's right. That I think insecurity is at the heart of a lot of conspiracy theories. People see something utterly unaccountable happen, and it so tilts their security of how the world works that they say it cannot be what it looks like. It must be something else. That's what gives them the manic drive to dig in and draw all sorts of dots and become lunatics and fill their houses with rubbish and back newspaper articles and what they call research and data. And yet he gives a breakdown in this. There's a graphic breakdown along with his piece about the nature of how conspiracy theory thinking has taken hold in America. America, prior to 2016, was genially but generally considered by the rest of the world to be big, drunk on power, and also a little bit nuts. And in the wake of 2016, it's been my experience. I have a lot of international friends. I'm not going to travel anywhere, but I have a lot of international friends. And in the wake of 2016, it's become my impression that now America is seen by the rest of the world as big, drunk on power, and completely and dangerously insane, where none of it makes any sense at all, where it is a rogue state, the biggest and most powerful in the history of the world, not just led by somebody who doesn't know what a time zone is and makes up countries every day and has to be coddled with cartoon pictures by people that are trying to staff him, but also everybody else. The polling numbers are just absolutely appalling as to the percentage of the people in the country who believe in leprechauns or that the earth is flat or whatever. And there's a graphic that accompanies this little piece that breaks down those percentages. And by far the biggest one that surprised me is that nearly 60, according to this anyway, well over 50% of the people polled that was consulted for this piece, well over 50% of Americans believe that 9/11 was an inside job. That's the phrasing. And that automatically reminded me of let me see what some of the other percentages are. 54.3% believe 9/11 was an inside job. 49.6% think that Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy, was not the assassin of JFK. 42% think global warming is a hoax. 27.8% think that Judge Antonin Scalia was killed. Didn't know that myself. And 24% think that the moon landing was faked. And I had no idea that the percentage for the 9/11 would be so big. And it, of course, reminded me of an old friend of mine who sadly is no longer with us. How I wish he were. How I wish that he could take that bacon slicer of a mind of his to Donald Trump. And I know exactly what, I know the rough outline of where he would start. He would start, as he always did in the past, he would start with Trump's family. And just dig and dig and dig. And he was a conspiracy theorist. He preferred the term researcher, and his specialty was RFK and also JFK. But the more thing happened, and if anything new and big and unaccountable happened, he would turn his attention towards it, start pulling files from newspapers, start interviewing people if he could. He was a great guy, and he was a conspiracy theorist who, although I think he shared in the bedrock instability that fuels virtually every conspiracy theorist that I've ever met, except for the handful that are just opportunistic. They don't feel it at all. They don't really believe it. They just know there's a book deal. There are no speak engagements to be made from it. Those I don't know what to think. But the true believers, he was a true believer. And he always used to say, one of his favorite things to say when he was called a conspiracy theorist is that he was okay being called a conspiracy theorist as long as you call everybody else a coincidence theorist. He used to say, if you're presented with something that looks completely unaccountable on its face, there's a chance that it is completely unaccountable. And that maybe, if you dig deep enough, you'll find out why and how. But I was reminded of him because when I read this piece, with Rosenbaum's theories of conspiracy theories, I was reminded that not all conspiracy theorists are crazy. It's just that almost all conspiracy theorists fall for the lure. And I believe he's right, that they're driven by insecurity. They're driven by a sense of, well, this is an outburst of pure, threatening chaos in an otherwise relatively ordered world. So not only will I posit a conspiracy theory, but I'll also posit a solution. So that not only do I gain back a parity of a sense of control, but even more. I gain back even more because I have hidden knowledge. I understand why this happened. I think conspiracy theorists are driven along that way, which it might explain why so many of them take that bait. And that's, of course, the Achilles heel of any conspiracy theory. I should point out, the thing I'm talking about here is that 9/11 conspiracy theory thing, because that percentage, I guarantee you, I haven't checked. Sometimes Esquire doesn't list its sources. I haven't checked. But I will only bet that number is fairly accurate, and I guarantee you that if I dig in, I will find that the thing that 52 or 53% of America thinks about 9/11 is not necessarily that it was an inside job, but just that the official story isn't true. Which is two different things, right? The official story by the national agencies that were tasked with analyzing what happened is one thing. 9/11 was an inside job is an encapsulation of one of the solutions. One conspiracy theory solution is that the elements of the U.S. government, perhaps going all the way up to the White House, either orchestrated these attacks on 9/11 or knew that they were going to happen and did nothing to stop them. But that's only one interpretation. That's just one theory. There are plenty of other theories. They range the spectrum. When it comes to 9/11, they range the spectrum from space-based laser weapons to a rather sizable number of people who claim that the attacks never happened, that the buildings, there were no planes. No planes on 9/11. I was almost said Google that, but I don't suggest that you Google any of this. But I guess I wanted to clarify because I think my old friend would probably have clarified too, that's an easy way to dismiss something when the official story of what happened on 9/11, not just the World Trade Center, but also the plane that that crashed into a field in Pennsylvania, and most especially the plane that hit the Pentagon. The official story explaining those events does not make sense. You don't need to be a crackpot conspiracy theorist to read the official story and say, well, okay, that doesn't add up at all, especially the Pentagon, but also the rest of it. There are, it's like I've mentioned on this channel before, in any conspiracy theory, there will be a hook. There will be hooks. There will be something hard and fast where you're reading blather and you are a normal person going about your day and you read blather and you think, okay, well, that's obvious blather. But then you'll read a bunch of blather and then somewhere in it there'll be a hook. Somewhere in it there'll be a mysterious little thing. She is now going to interrupt every video. I don't know why that is. I would almost suspect that Caleb is slipping her secret messages just so he gets something interesting instead of just me. Hello, baby. She now knows. It's not secret messages from Caleb, I don't think. I think it's just that she's a really, really smart dog. And I think she's realized what I'm doing. She's realized that I'm doing something she can interrupt. And that I'm doing something, that I'm not just talking out loud, that I'm not Skyping, that it's something different from that. Something she can interrupt. And I think she's starting to like doing that. It's okay by me if it's okay by you. But anyway, the point I was making is that in every conspiracy theory, usually, there's a hook of some kind. The one that has the most traction now, it has the largest increase in followers in the last 2 years, no coincidence, of any of them. It's almost a runaway phenomenon now, is Flat Earth. Just thousands and thousands of people professing. I don't know how many of them believe it. They could be trolling. But professing that they think the Earth is flat and the center of the universe, with the sun and everything else fixed in a firmament, in a bubble over the flat surface of the Earth. That is a conspiracy theory that has, in fact, no hooks. That is all blather. But some of them do have hooks. Most of them do have hooks. You can name it. Name your favorite conspiracy theory, and there will be a ton of blather and a few hooks. Like, for instance, let's say Bigfoot. You've got blather like crazy. Trans-dimensional beings, wise old alien elders, telepathic beings, that sort of thing. Bigfoot researchers, again, they like that term, claiming that there are sizable populations of these gigantic unknown anthropoidal species in every state. And that they come right up in the suburbs and raid dumpsters in broad daylight. You've got lots and lots of blather like that. But the hook for Bigfoot, for Sasquatch, is the eyewitness accounts. There are hundreds of eyewitness accounts, thousands of eyewitness accounts that are made by people who don't know each other. They're made, many of them, by people who literally never thought about Bigfoot until after they had an encounter with something in the woods, in Russia or in Indonesia or in the Pacific Northwest or in Canada. And when they come out of the woods and talk, sometimes belatedly because they're afraid of being mocked, their accounts bear such a similarity that it constitutes a hook. To say nothing of, let's leave aside footprints or anything like that, because the physical evidence is permanently, fatally hamstrung by the fact that there's no body. I don't care how many footprints you find in the wilderness. Footprints are easy to fake. A body is not easy to fake. And if you're saying that you have not only breeding populations of these giant animals, but cultures, things that are building structures and burying their dead with funeral rites, then you will have bodies, and there aren't any. And that is, as far as physical evidence, that's just a kryptonite bullet. But the eyewitness accounts form a hook. Only to say, the key is to step back from the hook and just say that it exists. That's all. You don't lose anything by saying that. The statement you can make about Bigfoot is that there are many, 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 many virtually identical eyewitness descriptions of something in the wilds of America. If you limit it just to that, there is simply no denying that. There's no way that you can call all of these things concerted or fake. Same thing with Loch Ness. There's no way possible that there is a plesiosaur or a breeding population of plesiosaurs in Loch Ness. That is simply not possible. No way at all. Cannot happen. Not totally impossible. But there have been eyewitness accounts of something that isn't a sturgeon, something that isn't one of the accounted for life forms in the area. And there are many, many eyewitness accounts of that. And not all of them take place in a time that was fueled by the industry of Nessie. So, if you take a step back from that hook, it's a small one, I admit. It's easy to mistake a big fish in the water for something much bigger than itself. But if it counts as a small hook, you can take a step back and say, all right, well, what you can say here is that there might be something living in Loch Ness that we haven't encountered. Not a plesiosaur, not a monster, but some kind of fish or eel that we haven't encountered, that we don't know. There are enough eyewitness accounts to maybe think that. And if it's true for Sasquatch and Loch Ness, oh my God, how much is it true for the Kennedy assassinations, Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy? Oh my God, there are enough moving parts in those to keep people busy forever, and they have. Nevertheless, there are genuine hooks in both of them. The forensics, in both cases, constitutes a hook. The forensics in both cases does not line up with the official story. That's all you have to do is say that. All you have to do is say that. And if you say anything more than that, you're a conspiracy theory nut. I mean, I might say that with affection. There are quite a few of them that I know that I like. But if you start saying that you know what the real thing is, then, you've gone too far because you don't know. But you can honestly say that there is a hook, that there is something that doesn't add up. There are elements in the JFK assassination that don't add up. I say that as someone who has probably read as much about it as anybody alive. There are elements in Bobby Kennedy's assassination that don't add up, most of them having to do with forensics and recordings. Hard stuff that doesn't add up. If you take a step back and look at it, you say, okay, well, that doesn't square. with what I'm being told. I don't know what the reason is. I don't know what the true story is, but this doesn't seem completely true. Another prime example, much closer to books since I've wandered far afield, would be Shakespeare. The Shakespeare authorship controversy that's been raging for 200 years. The problem with people who write whole books about the Shakespeare authorship controversy is that they always propose a candidate. If they say the official story, in this case, a boy who goes to a grammar school in Stratford-on-Avon, then apprentices at a theater company in London, and eventually becomes the greatest writer in the history of the human race. If you look at that story and you say, all right, well, that doesn't add up. Fine. That doesn't add up. That's the reason why this thing attracts new people. That's the reason why people who are completely sane can look at the Shakespeare story and say, oh, I don't know what the reason is, but I know that this story is very unlikely to be true. Let's put it that way. Generously, very unlikely to be true. Whatever the real story is, I don't know. But the conspiracy theorists always go too far. They always go the one extra step. And the same thing is true in what Rosenbaum talks about with when the graph that mentions 9/11, where better than half the country believes that 9/11. I believe that better than half the country believes that 9/11 didn't happen according to the way that the official story says. I don't know that better than half the country believes that they think it was an inside job. That's just a clarification that I wanted to make. I could have spent this video talking about all sorts of literary stuff. I don't consider Behold a Pale Horse to be literary. It's just garbage. And it saddens me to think that someone would spend time writing about its author. But it led me to a little 2-paragraph digression by a writer I really do like on the conspiracy theory of conspiracy theorists. I hope that is mentioned, that Ron Rosenbaum mentioned that, because in the back of his mind he's generating a book on the subject. That would be wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Because you encounter these things all the time. And in the 21st century, elsewhere in this little piece of his, he mentions that this is more relevant than ever because in the 21st century, people believe anything. It feels like the idea of reality is under assault. Otherwise, there could be no other time in American history where the flat Earth idea would take off the way it has now. The internet makes that possible. The internet and all sorts of public figures, including the President of the United States, believing things that are demonstrably not true. So you're entitled to your opinions, but you've just said something that I can prove to you is false. And that has been told to you. The proof that I could show that it's false was shown to you as well, and you said it anyway. You believe it anyway. You believe that it's true when it is not. That split is driven by the internet. It's also driven by something I called a long time ago, which is the cognitive dissonance that's created by so-called reality TV. No surprise to me at all that a reality TV star is president and taking advantage of this. Reality TV is not reality. It's more heavily scripted, edited, reshot than anything, than any normal dramas on TV, and it always has been. And I remember thinking 20, 30 years ago, I remember thinking, well, okay, you've got people, this is beating normal television programming all hollow. Only thing that people want to watch is reality TV. I'm hoping that everybody in those huge audiences understands that this is not reality, that they are not watching something like a fly on a wall. This is all carefully scripted and totally fake. And I remember thinking, as reality TV, you probably, if you're old enough, you'll remember that it started to elbow out everything else on TV. And I remember thinking, as it grew and grew and grew in popularity, I remember thinking, no, it couldn't be this popular if everybody knew that. So there's got to be a sizable portion of the population that follows this stuff that thinks it's real. And I remember thinking at the time how dangerous that was, but I had no idea. Of course, I had no idea how dangerous it was. Literally the end of us all. I had no idea that reality TV would end the human race. But one way or another, that puts the whole subject squarely in the spotlight for the 21st century. There's a new book coming out next month called Down the Rabbit Hole. I think we saw it on this channel. I have since read it. It's about dealing with conspiracy theories. It's about going down rabbit holes on the internet, really, although it deals with deeper roots of conspiracy theories. And it's fantastic. I hope that it will be one of a glut of books that we see on the subject, because we badly need it. But anyway, this whole video is in the nature of a digression. You see in the background, several of you have pointed out that often in videos now, you can see my little Fraulein walking to the bookshelf and just sort of gazing at the books. She does not. Some of you have asked, some of you have rather funnily said, well, you know, I know that dogs can't read. If any dog in the world can read, it's going to be Steve's dog. No, dogs can't read. She can't read. She's not looking at the books. She's looking to see if anything is loose and dangling. Dangling things are her pride and joy. She lives to grab them, pull them from wherever they're dangling, and destroy them, which makes it a little bit tricky for her to let her greet people on the sidewalk who see this adorable dog. They bend down, and they've got the earphone cords hanging down. She's ripped I don't know how many of those from people's ears in the last few months. I want to warn them, but I don't want to ruin the moment when they're greeting her, so I'll have to work it out. Because she can't, as happy as she is to meet strangers, she's overjoyed to meet strangers, but nothing overrides her hatred of dangling things and things that move without permission. So we're in the summer right now, so I'm getting a little relief, but as soon as there are dead leaves blowing on the sidewalk, our walks are going to be just the battle of the Somme. But anyway, this is just a rambly video. It'll be, you can just skip it. I'll make sure to annotate that it doesn't have much to do with books, so that you can just skip it. But I'll wrap it up for now. I just wanted to mention, I don't know, as odd as it is, I kind of wanted to come to the defense of some 9/11 conspiracy theorists who don't say that 9/11 was an inside job. There is a small group of them, many of them structural engineers, who say, I don't have a theory at all. I'm not saying 9/11 was an inside job. I'm just saying that what you're telling me doesn't work. What your official government explanation for this is obviously wrong. A lot of them talk about the collapses of the World Trade Center, the collapse of World Trade Center 7, and of course there's a respectful, even in the craziest parts of the conspiracy theory community, there's largely a respectful silence drawn over the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, because that crew knew what was happening and apparently were trying to fight what was happening. We don't know that for sure, but one way or another, there's enough credible hints to believe that, and that's just the worst. To be fighting for your life and know what's happening and not be able to stop it. But the Pentagon, the nerve center of the American military-industrial complex, that story, if I leave out, I don't know anything about structural engineering at all. And I, too, draw a respectful silence over Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But the Pentagon strikes me as fair game, and the story of the Pentagon does not make sense at all. Not any part of it makes sense. So you don't need to say 9/11 was an inside job to look at a layout of the facts of the Pentagon strike and say, okay, well, regardless of the rest of it, the version you're telling me here doesn't line up with the facts at all. So, I mean, even I think that, and I'm not a crazy conspiracy theorist, despite what this video might make you think. So I just wanted to clarify that for my brethren in the 9/11 truther movement. They're not really my brethren. The only one who ever talked about 9/11 in a way that I miss him. I do. I should check and see if some of his videos are on YouTube. His name was John Judge, and he was the real deal. He was someone who could go on and on and on about, he was compelling on the Jonestown massacre, just compelling. He got into the weeds, he studied the details too much, so that he came to spin conspiracy theories about everything. And that's wrong, that's unhealthy. But he could also stop and just talk books or social justice long before it had that term or whatever. He was, in other words, sane. He just had a very unhealthy indulgence. and his talk on 9/11 raises all sorts of questions, but he couldn't resist. Most of them can't resist naming people, blaming people, setting up an alternate system of events that relies on all sorts of stuff that's even more outlandish than the official story. That doesn't help at all. But anyway, just consider this a prelude to when we talk about conspiracy theories some other time. So I'll wrap this up and I'll annotate it so you can avoid this 30 minutes if you want to. And I'll see you all soon. Thank you, BookTube.